All right, as far as popular fighting games to have been released over the past year or so are concerned, one game that really doesn't get talked about as much as games like Dragon Ball Fighters and I believe Soul Calibur 6, which just came out, is Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Now, for those who do not remember, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite came out in late September, and since its release, it was a game that has not really, I don't think it lived up to many people's expectations in terms of sales and that of quality. Not that it's a bad game. The fact that Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite has a story mode with cinematic cutscenes is a first, and the cutscenes itself were great, especially considering the fact that the game utilized the Unreal Engine 4, and throughout the game you get to play as multiple characters from Ryu to Chun-Li to Mega Man to many other characters that are in that game as you're trying to take down the main antagonist, Sigma. And basically in the process of doing that, there's it's pretty much like a lot of cutscenes and a lot of stuff you go through, and it basically there are things that add to the overall quality of the game. But the problem is, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite is one of those games that once you basically beat the story mode, it feels like there isn't much to do afterwards. And I mean, you got an arcade mode, just like a basic arcade mode. You got a versus mode, you got a training mode, and you also got like an online multiplayer game mode where you can play other people online. But the thing is, one of the big things was that, in terms of gameplay, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, we basically went from having, 3-on-3 tag team action, similar to what you got in Marvel vs. Capcom 2 and 3, back to 2-on-2, which is something that was kind of a turnoff to people who are fans of Marvel vs. Capcom 3, along with the fact that, for whatever reason, Capcom has decided to move away from the comic book styled in terms of graphics, and it's something that it's one of the many things, one of the very small things that may have detracted from the overall quality of the game, along with the fact that the roster doesn't have too many X-Men characters, and a lot of people attribute that to, the fact that Disney owns Marvel, so the characters such as, Wolverine and Storm, they weren't able to make it in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, which is a shame because such characters were really big in the first 3 Marvel vs. Capcom games, and to not have them in this one just felt kind of weird. And that's another thing that leads to another issue. The roster wasn't bad, but it wasn't as great as Marvel vs. Capcom 3, especially considering the fact that there were less characters in Infinite than there was in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. So as far as whether or not Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite was a success, it managed to reach at least 1 million units worldwide in terms of sales. So it definitely wasn't a flop or a failure of any sort, but it wasn't as successful as Marvel vs. Capcom 3. It wasn't as popular as Marvel vs. Capcom 3. And unfortunately, from late 2017 going forward, especially all throughout 2018, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite was overshadowed by Dragon Ball Fighters, which ironically was like Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and had 3 versus 3 tag team player action. So it's just something that was just unfortunate. Had Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite been released a year earlier, or if it was set to release sometime this year, it probably would have shined more than it did when it came out in late 2017. But overall, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite would not be considered a bad game whatsoever. It's just a game that kind of fell below the expectations of many people. But overall, it's still a solid, crossover fighting game for those who are huge fans of the series.